Hello. Okay, we'll kind of get started. I know it's Saturday morning, and I appreciate everyone coming after probably a night of debauchery and fun to the first session of the morning. I am Elizabeth Farrell. This is my colleague, Katie Miller. We're both at Florida State University. And just to get it out of the way, we did not plan our outfits. We walked in and we went, oh, crap, we are coordinating. We did not mean to do this. So beg your forgiveness on that point. What we're talking about today is sort of the genesis of an idea. It's not actually a finished product yet. We started talking 6 months, a year ago, about the idea of sort of a legal information, a legal learning commons where students could, learn more about the law practice technology, get more practical skills, and we were somewhat tasked by our director to start just exploring the idea. What are other schools doing? What are the needs? Since this is a practical skills kind of thing, what does the legal academy want, or the legal community want students to learn? And so this is sort of the results of our research and where we're looking to go in the future with this. So, Katie.
So as Elizabeth said, our director has kind of this idea. I want to build this legal learning commons. I want students to be able to collaborate, to be exposed to technologies that they normally don't see in law school, but they're going to be exposed to in practice. So it raises a lot of questions. What are lawyers using in their practice? So we needed to do some research to answer these questions. We're thinking about providing stuff that will be valuable for the students so that they take something with them when they leave. So luckily, we found there's 2 existing surveys discussing technology use by lawyers in practice, and then we did an informal one. So I'm going to talk about those surveys just a little bit. The first one is the ABA's Legal Technology Survey Report, and they do this annually. Specific numbers, they send out 12,500 surveys. They received 823 responses in 2011. Like I said, they do this annually, and they send out the surveys to ABA members in private practice. So it's kind of limited only to their membership. And the other maybe kind of issue I had was kind of their demographics of their survey were slanted kind of towards practicing lawyers who've been practicing for a while. 56% of the respondents had been admitted to the bar 30 years or longer. If you look at the lower end, they had 1% of the respondents had been practicing 0 to 4 years, and 1% had been practicing 5 to 9 years. So they're not really getting the younger attorneys' responses on this. So, that's just probably by virtue of the younger attorneys are too busy to fill out these surveys, or maybe not ABA members, but maybe some of their data is lacking a little bit there. But one thing that they do ask that's really helpful is they distinguish, when they go through the technology and ask what you're using, they ask what's available at your firm and what do you personally use. So you can see technology maybe that they have but the paralegals are using. So that's a really good question that they asked. The next survey that we found was the University of Florida Legal Technology Institute survey. They completed it in January 2010, and this was a big 300-page survey. It was a random sampling of attorneys, paralegals, legal administrators, and corporate counsel. They got names from professional associations and then sent out surveys. They sent out 27,500 surveys, and they received 341 back. Lawyers are very busy. But they did capture some of that younger audience. They got 14.8% response rate from those 30 and under. 32.6% were in practice 1 to 5 years, and 16.3% were 26 years or more in practice. And theirs included private practice, corporate counsel, government, judicial, academic, and not in practice. So they got a broader spectrum of attorneys to respond, and a good mix of litigation and transactional, and both small and large firms. And then there was our survey. We just did a Survey Monkey, really, really informal, nothing scientific, 9 questions. I went through my address book, and I was like, oh, this person's a lawyer, and I sent it to him. I had my husband, who's a lawyer, do the same thing, and then asked him to send it out to his friends, and asked all the other librarians, if you know lawyers, send it out. So it's, it was small. It was just to gain some anecdotal information. Like I said, 9 questions. Just got some basic demographic information, and then some open-ended questions and some multiple choice asking about what they think about teaching technology to law students. At the beginning of our survey, we defined law practice technology as the software and tools used by attorneys to make their practice more efficient, organized, and successful. And we specifically stated for this survey, legal research databases were not included as legal practice technologies, so that we could just kind of take that off the table. And the responses that we got, very first question, just kind of gave them multiple choice. Do you think students need training using law practice technologies? And I think we got a pretty strong rate, 51 responses, saying 47% were definitely yes, 43.1 possibly. So if you combine that as maybe we should be teaching legal practice technologies, it's 90%. I think that's a pretty, it's a small sample, but it's a pretty strong indicator that they want the students exposed to some legal practice technologies before they enter the legal world. And then we went on to specifically ask what kind of legal practice technologies should they be exposed to. And this was, I left room for them to leave comments at the end as well, and we received some good comments. So somebody mentioning case management software is important. And another comment specifically mentioning electronic discovery is something that we should be teaching our students. Saying it should be part of the curriculum, and I think that's pretty strong indicator. And then just going through the percentages, we asked them about case management, and 70.2% thought we should be showing case management software to our students. 53.2% for records and document management. Trial presentation could be PowerPoint or anything that's getting them used to presenting. 46.8%. General litigation support, 44.7%. Billing software, 42.6%. And then we get down to some that were not as strong: conflict checks, metadata removal, redlining software, and smartphone apps. So they don't really care. I think they think maybe the students will pick up the smartphone apps on their own. And then we have the 10.6% that don't think that we need to be teaching any kind of legal practice management to our students. So specifically looking at the one where we got the strongest response rate, case management, I then looked at the ABA survey, and they asked if case management software was available at your firm. And it makes sense that it's available in most firms. That's why they want the students exposed to it. 50.6% of those that responded to the ABA survey said it's in their firm. But when they asked, do you personally use it, those numbers went down a little bit. Solo firms using it more personally, the attorneys using it personally, and 17.6% in the large firms use it personally. So even though attorneys may not be using it themselves, they're recognizing that, like, this exists in the law firm. Maybe the law students should be exposed to it and see it while they're still in school. This is another ABA survey results when they asked if you personally use PDF creation, redlining documents, and metadata removal software. And we had 53.2% say that students should be exposed to records and document management. And the ABA said that like 46.1% of lawyers are using it, so that kind of makes sense. But then when you look at metadata removal and redlining, the attorneys that answered our surveys were kind of like, you don't need to expose them to that software. But then I looked at the numbers, and most attorneys are using it. It's, if you look at redlining, in the big firms, 84.5 personally use the redlining software, and 85.9 use the metadata removal. So I thought that was interesting. They're not putting an emphasis on using that, but it's something that they're going to see in practice. We also asked which technologies were difficult to learn, and this was an open-ended question, so they could just fill in their response, so we got a little bit lower response rate. 2 people responded the case management software was difficult to learn. 3 said billing. 1 said I probably have a tough time with all of them. We had a strong rate that said none of them, and then we had just 1 individual that listed each of PowerPoint, integrated office system, empirical data presentation, or anything that had a different interface than Microsoft. We also asked which were the easiest technologies to learn, and this we just got single response rates from everybody. It was an open-ended question, and it was kind of just all over the place. The only response that got more than 1 individual was legal research. And 3 people said that legal research was the easiest technology to learn. And I thought, first of all, we excluded that in our definition, so the lawyers had already forgotten that we excluded that. We should have put it back in our question. But I thought, Lexis and Westlaw, if you give that password to a 1L, it's not that easy. It becomes easy because they're exposed to it and because they use it a lot. So I think that's kind of makes an argument for exposing them to the legal practice technology software, because as soon as they get used to using it, they're going to think it's easy, just like Westlaw and Lexis, which might not be that easy. So we got this data, and we're trying to think, how can we practically use it? And it can help guide what you're going to buy and maybe what you're going to teach your students. The ABA survey goes through and ranks the 3 top brands for each of the technologies. So right away you have, if you're thinking about buying these technologies to teach your students, you can see which ones you need to buy. And you can see that redlining software, 69 is Microsoft Word. So you don't even have to buy anything. If you want to do a workshop on it, you can use Microsoft. You don't have to purchase any products. For metadata removal, they're using Adobe Acrobat. So you don't have to buy anything. You can just explain the concepts using Adobe, or there's some other suggested brands of softwares that you could investigate. The same kind of thing for this is more ABA data for different kinds of software. And the UF study did the same kind of thing. They asked about specific software, and they tell you how many responses. And you can see it's kind of all over the place. There's not really a strong response for a particular brand, but here you have a place to start if you're investigating buying some of these technologies and billing software. And document management systems. So we had that small percentage that said, maybe you shouldn't be teaching legal practice technology to the students. And I think there's a lot to learn from the critics as well. And some of them took the time to write comments, and I think it's helpful. But I'm also going to counter everything they say. These are training issues that should be the responsibility of the new lawyer and his or her employer. They shouldn't be part of the curriculum. And I think to an extent that's right, but it could be taught in workshops. It doesn't have to be a class. It doesn't have to replace their contracts class. It doesn't have to replace torts. It can be a supplement. So it doesn't have to be part of the curriculum, and it helps save maybe some training time. Maybe the first time they show it to a student who's been exposed to it, they can say, oh yeah, I've used it, and they can get on with the other important stuff in their practice. Most of the administrative work is done by assistants. Having a paralegal or assistant is a privilege, not a right. And not all of our students are going to have assistants. They're not all going to have paralegals. Some might hang their own shingle. They might be on their own. So it'd be helpful for them to do these kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, Ken Hirsch at Cincinnati, and I think in this economy, we're finding at Cincinnati a lot more of our students are in fact considering going solo or their own joint firm with a fellow student.
Mm-hmm. And when you start your own firm out of law school, are they bringing on a paralegal?
Of course not. And I'm sorry I was out of the room when you started this set of slides. Is this what the faculty are saying?
No, these are the critics, the people that took our survey.
Oh, so attorneys in practice who
maybe
think that everyone else's practice is like their practice.
Yeah, can't see outside their own world. So, yeah.
Additionally, one of the important things about having an assistant is knowing what they do so that you can supervise them appropriately.
Yeah.
So if you don't really know how the tools work, if you have a bad assistant, you don't necessarily know it. Or if you have a really good assistant, you don't necessarily know that possibly they're being really efficient with a really bad system.
Right. And the ABA survey showed redlining and metadata removal in the large firms, the 500 plus attorney firms. They all have assistants. If they're in a firm with 500 and plus, they're doing those things on their own anyway. So even if they do have assistants, some of that administrative work is done by attorneys. Yeah. And another comment, a lot of this should be done in paralegal courses, not substantive legal courses. So, and like I said, it doesn't have to be in a legal course. It could be a workshop. It could just be a technology lab where they can play around with it. We got a response, probably from an older practicing attorney, that the world's really different from when they went to school in the 70s. Like, would this be any good? And things change a lot quicker now than in the 70s, so maybe it is an argument. We're going to show it to them now, and by the time they graduate, things are going to be different. But this gets into our transliteracy a little bit. So,
and just to jump in for that, the whole thing with things being so different. An attorney that graduated law school, 30 years ago maybe. Back then, typing was not always regarded as an essential skill. And, I'll have my secretary type this up, I'll dictate this. Nowadays, I couldn't even imagine a law student even coming to law school not having typing skills. So, although I'm sure some do, but just sort of the progression of those skills, like what is farmed out to assistants today may be part of what the attorney does as part of their work process, in the future.
Mm-hmm. Another comment about it being difficult to select just one program when every firm does something different. And we could see that in our data a little bit, that there was a wide variety of software.
Might as well let the perfect be the enemy of good.
Just don't do it at all. We can't figure it out. But again, this comes into transliteracy, which I'm going to talk about in a couple slides. They're not cumbersome to use or learn. Anyone who's computer literate will pick it up after a few short hours of training. And that's great. Why can't that few short hours of training be while they're in law school? Save the employer some time. So those last 3 slides talking about, how do you choose? There's too many out there. Kind of leads into our goal of transliteracy. And transliteracy is something we saw being discussed a lot in just the library world. And a good definition of it, a working definition, it comes from the Libraries and Transliteracy website, which is where a lot of the people are writing about it in the library world. And they say that it is the ability to read, write, and interact across a range of platforms, tools, and media. And that's what they've started with. And an article from Tom Ipri in November 2010 College and Research Libraries, talked about how transliteracy comes from the word transliteration. So if you're traveling to somewhere that doesn't use Roman letters, you got a book and you need to learn how to say restroom or restaurant, it wouldn't help if they printed, restaurant in English and then, in Hebrew characters, which a lot of people don't know how to say, next to it. So transliteration is when they take how you would say it in Hebrew and they put it in Roman letters. So then you can say this. I don't know how to speak Hebrew. And you're basically, you're mapping meaning across languages. So transliteracy is mapping meaning across media. And I think that kind of definition helped me. And there's some kind of discussion or arguments in the library conversations that are happening about transliteracy that this isn't really a new term. It's captured under information literacy, or it's captured under digital literacies. And they're arguing that it's an umbrella term that captures all of those literacies, and it's how everything interacts together. So without getting really caught up in the academic conversation about transliteracy, we were thinking about how it would work in the legal world. And I think it's kind of dual. It's combining the book learning with the technology learning. It's how they interact. It's taking the rules of evidence from evidence class to a trial presentation class and using technology to do your arguments. But it's also being able to learn one type of software and being able to carry it over to a different brand of software, but still understand that billing software is billing software, or that case management software is case management software. And we didn't talk about transliteracy in our survey, but we had some quotes that I think they encourage transliteracy. Somebody saying expose them to something. It doesn't matter which program, but just generally what's out there. Or they should learn about metadata issues and e-discovery, but it doesn't matter which software you teach them. And another person saying, it's not about the technology, it's expose them to some kind of software. They used CaseMap and TimeMap as examples, and they begin to learn how to organize their cases. They begin how to do these things before they even start. I think this is really transliteracy. It changes their behavior, it changes how they work, and they know how to use the technology. So Elizabeth's going to talk about what's currently going on in law schools.
And a perfect illustration is I see, of the transliteracy thing is I see a bunch of people with iPads. And how many of you that have iPads also had, maybe before you got an iPad, had a phone that was a touch-sensitive screen? How hard was it for you when you had your iPad to jump right over and sort of figure out how it worked? The gestures, you knew how to do that. Pretty simple. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward comparison, but sort of the same translatable skills apply when we talk about transliteracy. Talking now about, where we're at, what law schools are doing right now. And I sent out a survey. Again, this is sort of an informal information gathering, just trying to get a sampling of what law schools are doing. And many of you, I think in this room, got my plea for your data over the Technoids listserv or other listservs. So I appreciate in advance for all of you that contributed and took the time to give me your information. We got a response rate of about a little under 50 law schools. So not, all the ABA accredited schools, but I think that's a fairly good sample size just to sort of get a snapshot of what law schools are doing. When I asked in that survey, one of the very first questions is your school doing anything teaching or showing students law practice technology as part of, whether it's curriculum, a clinic, any kind of thing that they were getting in school, not from a separate outside work experience. Of those, 40, 50 schools I got responses from, about 10 or 12 said, no, my school isn't doing anything. And so right off the top, I want to sort of get the data I'm going to show you reflects just that 80% of schools that are doing something. So there's 20% that are out there that aren't doing anything. And then question two, sort of the big question too, is that, okay, schools, if you are doing something, you are involving it in the curriculum, how many of your graduates, by the time they graduate as 3Ls, have had some kind of exposure? Not even anything formal that, they've had a class, or just some kind of exposure in any way. The bulk of them was, 65% of the schools were under 25% of their students, saying under 25% of our grads have had any exposure to this. And there was a few schools that were very admirably up there, over half their grads, over 3/4 of their grads had some exposure. So there was we saw in what Katie was talking about, the surveys from the practitioners, the data from the practicing attorneys saying, yes, this is important, that there is, or even if they didn't think it was important to teach in law school, it was a big part of their daily life. And students are not getting that exposure. And I think everyone, it's kind of been rehashed multiple times. We got the Carnegie report, all the various discussions have been out there about giving law students the skills that they need so they can hit the ground running. I think this is a big part of that. And clearly there is a lot of room, to grow in this. So, for where when it is happening in law schools, where is it happening? The bulk of this is the clinics, as you can imagine, that the practical, real-world application of it. Also, law practice technology, law practice management courses that are out there. Workshops or training, those are more, the informal, the one-off things. Externships, trial practice management course, skills lab courses, just through informal things like the library blog, advanced legal research, librarians in doctrinal courses doing guest lectures. And then, this is another, the little subset, 26% said they weren't offering any, formal opportunities to learn that material. So it's scattered. It's all over the place where they're learning it. It's not a unified thing. And in fact, I got some feedback on the survey, some questions at the get-go going, in fact, some people in this room, in fact, and not just one of them said, I'm not really sure about some of these questions. I don't know. We don't have a single point of contact for who does this kind of thing in our law school. And my discovery was it is the rare school that does. This is a real scattershot thing, even in the schools that are doing, that do have efforts to teach this. So, all this data is not necessarily, like I said, it's not statistically perfect, but it shows that there's not a single place where they're getting this information, but there are also a lot of opportunities where you can involve this, kind of teaching, kind of exposure for students, whether informally or formally. And so, the types of things that they're learning. I apologize for that slide. I'll sort of. The contrast is not good on the big screen. I'll kind of go through here. When these are the different the sort of classes of things that were touched upon in the ABA and the different surveys. The types of software, the types of tech, time and billing, document management, document assembly, case management, conflict checking, and trial presentation. The blue column, the blue part of the column represents the schools that used those kinds of software in clinics. So as you can imagine, time and billing was a big thing in clinics. It seems like clinics, if they're using anything, the students do get a good grasp of time and billing. Where the red segments was very few and far between, where they were getting exposed to things as part of classes. So in formal classes, they were being shown a little bit of that, but not much. And then the green part of that is that it's completely not available to students. Then this is as a percentage of the responses. So there's areas that, these were identified as, in the AB report, in the other surveys, as areas where there was some importance to learn it because attorneys are using it. And then, what's actually happening. The schools that are doing this, that are teaching it, that are using it in their clinics and other classes, even then, they aren't giving a real comprehensive holistic approach to sort of teaching and showing students any of this. Now, sort of where it's been taught, but then also looking at who is teaching this, who is actually, being the point person, the point people involved in showing this in the school. The big bulk of them here at the bottom, clinic faculty are doing the most of this teaching, followed by, librarians and vendors, adjunct faculty, IT staff, tenure track faculty, legal research and writing faculty, and I had someone tell me that their instructional technologist does this at their school. What I take away from this, and I'm happy to get anyone else's feedback, is sort of piggybacking on that comment that I got that there's no single point person for this in our school. And I see this as, okay, there's all these people that are involved in different schools, and if my takeaway is that if there isn't anything being done at your school, or there's maybe very little efforts, there is tremendous opportunity for you to be a point person. It doesn't have to be, oh, I can't, I'm just a librarian, that's not really my role. Whose role is it? No, there's no clear winner on who is the point person, who is the leader in this area. So I think if it's something that you're interested in or you want to take back to your school, you can become someone that influences and helps shape that and offers that to your students. There's not, here at an organization like CALI, and a lot of us are, work in different capacities in our schools. Any of us, there's not, a single point of contact or a single source where all of this is coming out of. So, I think take advantage. We can have opportunities to become leaders in our school or beyond to show students this. So, okay. We talked about sort of the status quo, what's going on in schools right now. If we are looking forward, this one very heartening thing that I took away is I asked in the survey, okay, is your school planning on or are you considering expanding opportunities for students to learn about this? And this was actually, it was something like 47 to 53%, 47% said yes, we are. So I think it is on people's radar, especially, I don't know any law school dean or faculty that, hasn't had a little bit of, soul searching, about the Carnegie report and all that. And so people are thinking about things. I got a lot of feedback, sort of comment, anecdotes about, hey, we're thinking about offering a law practice class, or maybe we're going to, expand our clinic offering. So there's schools are thinking about it, and I think it's opportunity for us because it is on people's radars, it is on administration's radar that they need to get skills in. So I think for any of us, we have the opportunity to take and run with this. And so one of the concerns, I know I have this concern that, okay, it's great that we want to show and we want to educate our students on this area, but, maybe I wasn't in private practice. I never really had this exposure. Maybe it's been 20 years since I was in practice, so this seems like something that I don't know, and I'm not comfortable with teaching. There are resources to learn from, and there's things that we can, the ABA report, seeking out organizations, especially there's a ton of trade organizations, professional associations that have conferences, have newsletters, have journals that are all up in this area. The ABA Tech Show is a huge annual conference, but even beyond just the ABA, their Legal Resource Technology Center, there's all these kinds of organizations out there that are geared towards technology, they're geared towards law practice, and oftentimes they're not just purely attorneys. A great one that I found a lot of interesting information from is the ALA, the Association of Legal Administrators, which is, that's a group for administrators, assistants, but this group and the people within it can be movers and shakers within their firms that, okay, this is the software we're using, this is how we're doing things in our firms, and a lot of resources to learn from. So there are opportunities out there. Conferences, I know the ITLA, the International, or ILTA, butchered that acronym. The International Legal Technology Association also has a big conference, I think comparable to the tech show, that you can get information from. And I've not had the pleasure of going to the tech show, but I've had colleagues who have and other peers out here. Maybe a few of you have gone, and I've heard nothing but good things about just sort of getting exposed to what attorneys are using, what's coming up on the horizon. So, and of course, the people resources. CALI is a great organization for that. You know, I hit you all up a few weeks before this about asking, what are your schools even doing? And when I asked, hey, would anyone, if I needed to follow up with you and ask questions, the majority of you were happy to offer help. So there are people out there, and I know it's been a topic discussed before at CALI about law practice management classes. There's that opportunity. I'm sure, if anyone wanted to do this, the Technoids, CALI, just even within the law school community, there's a ton of resources that we can learn from each other and find out, hey, what are your schools doing? What software, what all these different things. So we can, if you're kind of starting at zero, but you want to add this into your curriculum, kind of like where we're at with Florida State. We have some clinics using things, but by and large, the percentage of our students in clinics is very small. And so we are starting saying, okay, it would be nice if we maybe had more experience with some of this stuff, but we think it's so important that we are going to figure it all out. We're going to get experience. We want to show students. So I think we can't be timid and jump into this. We're, a lot of us IT people, librarians, we're good about sort of adapting to change and figuring things out. So I think we can just take that, take those transliteracy skills that we have ourselves and take that into the this realm to teach, show our students one more thing. And sort of piggybacking on the people resources, this is a little slice from the University of Florida survey. They asked about if you're involved in a software purchase decision in your law firm or department, where does your firm or law look for or find information about new software technology? The biggest category was recommendations from colleagues. So things like, this survey data, the ABA, those influences, whether they're in practice, in schools, we can talk to our peers, hey, what are you using for your clinics? I know I've seen that question pop up multiple times on Technoids. So we can keep, utilize all those people resources and the information that we have from each other. So, okay, well, that's, looking forward, how do we implement, sort of, okay, hopefully we've convinced you that this is important, and where we're at, we're kind of at a, there's a dearth of opportunities for students to learn this. How do we implement things in our law school for increasing the amount of students that get exposed to this, or even just starting with at least a few students that know this? The classic answer is clinics. And that is, some law schools have a lot of clinical opportunities, some of them don't. And this is kind of a no-brainer. But I'm not going to get into this too much because, honestly, a lot of the clinic aspects are completely out of our control, and they tend to be very expensive. And so if you have a school that has a lot of clinic opportunities, and awesome for you, awesome for your students, but I know that's not something that a lot of us in this room can sort of push forward on. So in the absence of that, there's a couple other things. Law practice management courses, law practice technology courses. These are a big one, and I'm not going to rehash anything that at length here, because I know in very recent CALI conferences this subject has been touched upon. I think this is an opportunity as well. I've looked at a number of syllabi and from a number of schools about law practice management courses, and it's funny because a lot of them, or at least a fair number of them, don't really get into the technology aspect. And I think that's something that even if there is an existing class at your school, maybe that's worth sort of talking with the professor or the adjunct who teaches that and sort of partnering with them, saying, hey, just kind of curious, what are you doing? Is there anything that we can help you with? We have the privilege this year, we have a new member, a faculty member that's taking over that class, and I've already kind of hit them up going, we should sit down and talk about this. Did you know how much data we have? I was telling her that, we had this ABA report, and she was really receptive and really interested because she just didn't know what was out there. She even told me, I know I want to talk, I want to bring this in, but I just don't know where to start. It's, it's almost it's too big of a topic, that she felt intimidated by it, but I said, hey, we can sit down, I can show you what the data is out there, what the resources are out there. And so going forward, she's going to be she has a little bit more confidence, she has that ability to bring that stuff into our class, coming into the fall because of the partnership. Not anything, formal, but just sort of the same kind of typical service that, the librarians provide to any faculty, research support, but this was in sort of a different way of partnering, talking about the technology and sort of finding the resources that were out there to support that. So I think that's an opportunity there that if you have something in your school already, that start talking to the professors and seeing if there is anything. Volunteer to say, hey, I could come into your class one day and, do a little mini workshop on this, or offer optional workshops for your students to come and, learn about something in our computer lab. So those are opportunities. But the one that we're most excited about, and the one that we're really exploring to sort of implement at Florida State, is sort of the learning lab, the learning commons model. And this is something that if you are reading at all sort of the literature of the wider library world, the learning commons, the information commons is a really hot topic right now, and it has been for a number of years. You see it a lot at undergraduate libraries, and in fact, our main library at FSU, the Sturzier Library, they recently reconfigured their whole first floor into their learning commons, and it's kind of a hard to define concept in a way, because in essence it is a very modular, very flexible working space, study space, teaching space. And that's what I don't mean to put this out there that we're sort of throwing out a loosey-goosey solution, but it is in a way that sort of creating a space, and not necessarily this is something I'm telling people to go out and spend a bunch of money that they don't have or they can't get to do construction, but have an area that is flexible for either teaching, learning, and collaboration, whether it's independent or instructor-led. And the essence of the learning commons at FSU, and I know when they went and planned it, they went all across the country looking at other schools, and in fact, a lot of I challenge you to, if you have parent institutions or you're in an area with other universities, check out what their undergraduate libraries have, because a lot of them have implemented this. It's really kind of an exciting thing that's going on in a number of undergraduate libraries, and not necessarily the ones that you think have buku bucks, but they are doing things in their own way. Just sort of this is a rough sort of floor plan. But in the space over at Sturzier, they do have an area of smart study rooms in the back that have all the kind of cool integrated technology, the smart boards, the collaboration stations, and those even are modular in ways that they can move walls around. And there is obviously if you do have some money to throw at the problem, you could do some even cooler things with the space so they can actually make, transform a large classroom into small individual study rooms very quickly, and vice versa. But out here, sort of in the main area, and I know some of you are even Florida State graduates, especially if you are, I know Ken is, it is completely different than what you remember. That center space is a very flexible space of sort of easily moved tables for, independent study, independent computer use, and they can drag tables around students, and they do quite a bit to sort of work together and work collaboratively. And it gives the opportunities for students to learn together and work on projects together, as well as, the flexibility of the classroom spaces, and have they have roving, freestanding sort of service points for both librarians, circulation staff, and so on and so forth. And so they have a lot of cool things that they're doing that they have a really fantastic tutoring program that has really taken off, that, during given hours, they'll have someone at a table sort of doing, walk-up tutoring. And the way we took that, hey, well, in the law school context, we could use that for, have sort of walk-up, legal writing help, or, hey, I'm working on this, have, walk-up demos for different software. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And even if it is something that there's a, hey, we don't have a lot of money to do this, how can we, make something work, that, sort of take existing, just if you have a computer lab, start small, just sort of give students a space where you've, purchased, or downloaded for free a number of the law practice technology, all the software, have workshops, have opportunities for them to learn. Sometimes just having it on the computers that are in the lab or the computers that are available for students to use can be a big thing. I mean, how many people just have learned things just because some software, the software is on their computer and they just start poking around? I mean, I've very rarely ever taken any kind of formal software training. It's sort of, hey, I'm just poking around. I want to learn about it. I figure it out. Just having it available for students to mess around with, whether that's, I don't know how the licensing works, if you could actually offer it to put on their own laptops and computers, but definitely it's something you can do however your library or law school set up on, in a computer lab or on the PCs that are available in the sort of the general area for the law school. So to get sort of more into the learning commons concept, it is by and large a study space, but it's modular in many ways. These are images, Creative Commons images, of course, different implementations in different schools. And just as a heads up, if you are the librarian or the type of administrator that really just loves that very formal setup, the classic reading room, everything ducks in a row, everything, the Learning Commons model is not for you, because things are by the very spirit of it is that they, students can work together, they can collaborate, they can learn things together, or learn things, have sort of very, demos and instruction one-on-one. So you can, use that as a sort of that study space, also a multi-purpose space. Again, using it for all kinds of different purposes. But at its core, it is really sort of providing opportunities, so for not only collaboration, but independent and guided learning. We found that just sort of talking with our alums, practitioners, and I'm sure a lot of you have encountered the same thing, that law school in general, whether it's the system of the curves and the grades, it's a very sort of, this is, I'm working and I'm learning in my own bubble. Like you very rarely do group work or you have group projects. But out in practice, I mean, you're very rarely going things alone. You're working with, you might be working with a group of people, and you're having to sort of collaboratively, put something together, work, tackle different pieces of the project. And so I think giving students the opportunity, if you have the ability to work together, that students will take advantage of that. And we've sort of started. We've developed. Just in recent small renovations of how, putting in a conference room, students they'll take over those spaces and just use them for all kinds of different purposes that we never intended. And so I think we can take advantage of that and use those spaces and use those students that they want to learn. A lot of our students do want to, they are concerned with getting jobs, and we find that they're very receptive to any kind of thing that we say, hey, this is something you need to learn for when you're out in practice. So those, all kinds of different opportunities, and I think it scales very well. If you have a lot of money and you're embarking on a big renovation, then I think it's worth taking a look at different models and what different schools have done, especially at the undergraduate level, because that's where they're doing some innovative things. But even if you don't have a ton of money, just sort of starting to add that into your offerings at the bare minimum, you can do a lunchtime sort of brown bag workshop in your computer lab. So there's, all kinds of different things. And I know that there's probably people doing things at their law school, so I'd like to sort of open it up if people want to sort of start that learning process and learning from each other what people might be doing at their schools to encourage this kind of learning and collaboration. So.
If I could monopolize about 2 minutes of time.
Go for it.
I'm going to be making a course proposal at Cincinnati, in fact, in about a week and a half to start with. And I wanted to commend, one's a shameless plug and the other one is someone else's writing, but I wanted to commend to all of you. When Wayne Miller and I started the technology course at Duke, it's been taught there since 2005. A year before that, we published an article called Law School Education in the 21st Century, Adding Information Technology Instruction to the Curriculum, which of all places was published in the William & Mary Bill of Rights Journal. I'll tell you about that if you ever want to know why it's there. But the easiest way to get to it is on the Duke faculty repository, which is at scholarship.law.duke.edu, and just search under my name or Wayne's name, Miller or Hirsch without a C. And why I say you may want to look at this article is it precedes the work that these two fine ladies have done in terms of survey. What Wayne did was in effect, a literature review of law school published catalogs on their websites to try to identify technology courses. And then the rest of the article is our argument for why law school should be doing this. So if you're looking for something to bolster your argument, you might find something helpful in here. Something else that is something I want to add to our curriculum in this area is work that Ann Kleinfelter did. And she presented on this, she didn't present it formally, but she brought this for an informal discussion at the Future of Law Libraries Conference. And this is what I consider will become the seminal article in the field of, when we read about web tracking, internet tracking, we're all thinking about effect on consumer rights. But her article went to researchers to reveal the growing threat to attorney and client confidentiality from online tracking. This is an excellent article that, first of all, if you are not up to speed on how the technology works, will tell you about that, and then goes beyond that to provide an extensive discussion of what we as teachers and what our students and attorneys need to consider is at risk when you go online to do anything for a client. And this is going to be published at the Virginia Journal of Law and Technology, Volume 16, Number 1. And it looks like it's I see the preprint, so I don't have a page number for you, but it's by Ann Kleinfelter, the director of the library at Carolina. So those are two excellent things. A couple of people who are excellent resources. In fact, at least I know David will be happy to be a guest speaker at any course, is David Whalen, who is now up at, I think, in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe Ontario, as the director of a law library. It's timing me out because I don't want to talk anymore. There we go. Maybe my finger's just wearing out. But who also used to be the director of the Legal Technology Resource Center at the ABA, and Andy Atkins, who used to be the director of that center that ran the survey that you were referring to at Florida, and I believe he's got his own consulting operation now. Two excellent resources for you.
Thank you.
Did you think about maybe asking your career services office or your director of alumni relations whether they might have some insight into this, because they're kind of dealing with law firms or state attorney general's office or wherever your graduates are going, and are they getting any kind of feedback that says, or maybe they could ask to get feedback, because they're probably going to be, their hand's going to kind of be on the pulse of recent graduates.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we did not explore for sort of our just sort of informal survey, but that is something, especially contacting and talking with our alums was something that we definitely, and in fact, the survey did include a number of our alums just by virtue of sort of networks that we broadcasted to, but I think they are a resource if you can make that work. I know we, for the purposes of this study, we thought there might be a little bit, since this wasn't really a formal endeavor, that sort of trying to get the data from, working with the alumni people might have been there might have been a few roadblocks that we would have had to conquer, which doesn't mean it's not worth doing, but just sort of the culture, the institutions vary. So I think they are a resource. I know one school that blanking on the name, but I remember hearing at AALL a year or two ago, that they had a sort of an alumni panel that they used as a resource, and I think that's sort of a neat way to approach things. Sort of having we have something like that, not really for the library, but generally, and I think sort of having a sort of a sounding board or a place to go for ideas among your alums is a great place to start.
Do you have any sense if any of the vendors of these software products are interested in coming into law schools the way Lexis and Westlaw do with lowball pricing so that the students can familiarize themselves with their products?
I know some of us, especially the ones that are owned by like Lexis and Westlaw, they have been fairly. Who's got the case NAB, spiel? Yeah. I know those have been, interested in sort of that building preference and getting their stuff out in the schools. I don't know. I haven't done a sort of cast a wide net. I don't know if anyone has experience generally with different vendors.
I'm just kind of curious. This isn't actually an answer to that question. I'm just curious to know, at one time, the training for things like time management, case management programs was very expensive. You had to pay for it. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering if vendors have backed off on that a bit in the last few years.
Case management, the experience I have is LexisNexis will give you the license and software for Time Matters, for example. Now, and they'll bring in someone to present on it for you. Now, if you're setting it up for a clinic, unless you have on-site expertise, you're basically going to need about $50,000 worth of consulting to properly configure the server and so forth you're going to set it up on. But the license itself is nothing. If you don't want to have an actual installation for students to practice on, then for free they'll be glad to come in and demo it to your class. And I'm pretty sure, although I haven't asked expressly, I think we did at least once have someone from West come in and talk about their KM product if that's another thing you want to show.
Yeah, and I think there's opportunity. Ken brings up a really good point that, and this is one of the things I know, sort of expanding offerings in clinics can be, for a variety of reasons, can be challenging. But sort of offering students the opportunity to sort of get their feet wet, if it's in a lab, it's, you don't necessarily have to have the entire server setup done. If you have the software hosted locally on the different PCs, that you're not worrying about actually sort of using it for major projects, that you can just sort of let them have a sandbox to play in a way. Pam?
Just to speak to different vendors, I don't know that much about the traditional vendors, but obviously I talked about using a law practice management technology thing a couple days ago, and I know that Clio is at least really receptive to making some sort of deal.